Hi, my name is Andrew Phoenix, your magician. Today, let's talk about magicians charging too little and why most of the people complaining about it have arguments based on bullshit. I had no idea what to do for an opening. When you start looking for your first gig, one of the first questions that are going to come into your mind is, well, how much do I actually charge for it? Now, most magicians won't even tell you how much they personally charge, and a large chunk of them will hesitate to even give you that answer. However, there is a very vocal minority who love to crucify and criticize you if you dare undercharge what they consider is the normal rate. Even though most won't even tell you how much they charge, so it's hard to gain an actual normal rate. Now, for the sake of the video, let's just assume anything under 200 an hour is undercharging. As for my research suggests that this is quite an acceptable low number for a beginner to start at. Now, you'll find from my argument that that number doesn't really matter, so feel free to replace that number with anything that you find morally or socially acceptable. So why mention it? Because while it's not important to my side of the argument, it is important to the other side of the argument. You see, magicians charging too little create a massive problem in the magician entertainment industry. And this normally boils down to two main arguments. Argument number one, magicians charging too little actually hurt the marketplace for everyone. And think, if you were a client and you hired a magician for £50 an hour, well, next time you go looking for a magician, you're probably expecting around £50 an hour as well, or at least something in that ballpark. So imagine your surprise when you see 150 or 200, 250, even 500, 10 times the amount you were expecting. Well, you're probably not going to be looking there. You might not hire those magicians, and in fact, you're probably going to continue looking for a magician of a similar price point. This means other magicians charging more than £50 an hour have two choices. One, not to take the gig, or two, to lower their prices to remain competitive. So not only are you earning less money than you could have, you're actually ruining the economy for everyone else. You're damaging the marketplace. Argument number two. If you charge too little, you're actually less likely to get a gig. No, really, think about it for 2 seconds. Put yourself in the mind of a client. Why are you charging £50, but that person's charging £200? I know why. Because you're low-tier trash garbage, right? That's the only reason you'd be so cheap. But that guy must be good because he's more expensive. It's like when you're looking at chocolate bars in Asda's or Tesco. Well, that chocolate bar is 30p and that one's £1, so of course it's obvious which one's the better one, right? Just like it's obvious who's the better magician. So that's why you should be setting yourself at a higher price margin or a higher price point. Because if you do, it makes you look like a better magician and it actually means you get more gigs and a higher pay. It's win-win, right? So why wouldn't you do it? Why wouldn't you raise your prices, right? Because not only does it benefit the whole magic world, it actually benefits you yourself. The market stays good in the magic world and your prices stay good and you get hired more. Of course you do it, right? Now, apart from these 2 points, there's also an underlying concern that a magician that charges too little might actually undercut other magicians, not on purpose, but by accident. Now, although this wasn't brought up as much, I just thought I'd had to include it because I thought it was a fun excuse just to do this. Hi, you booked a magician? Ooh, yeah, sorry, we actually went with someone else. You went with someone else? Yeah, that guy over there? He said he will do it for £50 an hour. Oh, here's where I start getting the dislikes. If you're thinking that looks stupid and overly simplified, then you're right. It was done purposely as a comedy bit. But the problem is the argument against magicians undercharging a certain amount is in itself normally oversimplified and don't take in fact many factors such as where you live, how much experience you have, and how much profit you're making after the cost. Yes, I was looking at my notes. But rather than doing comedy skits out of each of these points, let's take a moment to actually break down the arguments and try and identify what's wrong with each of them. Starting with the first argument that a magician undercharging or charging too little actually hurts the marketplace for all magicians. One of my biggest issues with this argument is it's almost impossible to tell what the actual market price of a magician is. Sure, there's a couple amazing books out there that give you some set guidelines on what you should charge. However, they're not necessarily universally agreed on. There's no magic circle or magic castle that tells you what you should be charging. In fact, it's very opinionated from person to person. And not only that, but most magicians won't actually tell you how much they charge. So it's almost impossible to tell whether a magician is actually undercutting the market value, because it's almost impossible to tell what the actual market value is. Okay, let's be honest for 1 second, just between me and you. We've all exaggerated how much we've got paid, right? Because, it feels good if we get paid a lot, because it means we're very good magicians, doesn't it? And we've all lied a little bit, haven't we? Isn't that right? Terry. Can't do it. Even I've lied about how much I've made during a gig one time. It was about £100 an hour, but I said I did 250 because I didn't want a certain magician to criticize me. And do you know what happened? That motherfucker criticized me. So if we as magicians don't have a universally agreed price point, and we don't universally understand what is cheap, medium, or expensive, then how the fuck do we expect normal people to know? I mean, seriously, start asking normal people how much we charge. Start asking your friends or family, how much do you think a magician costs? Your co-workers, how much do you think a magician costs? And I can almost guarantee all of them will say a lot less than you're expecting, or just be flat out wrong. People have a set expectation when they go out to hire a magician. They have no actual proof of how much a magician should charge. They just go out, they see a profile, they see a show reel or whatever the magician advertised, and they see a cost. And it's up to them to decide whether they think that magician is worth the cost at that point. Now, there might be 1 or 2 people that have picked up a £50 magician, not knowing that's the not universal standard, but I don't think that really reflects on how they're going to buy in the future. Just like you buying a banana for 30p doesn't stop you from buying a more expensive one from M&S. Ask yourself this. How many phones are cheaper than Samsung and iPhone? How many times have you taken your Valentine's to McDonald's instead of a fancy restaurant? How is Primark not ruining Gucci?
Oh my god, is that a Louis Vuitton bag?
Oh yes, it is. It's kind of expensive, but it's nice.
Yeah, well, I found a cheaper one in Primark.
Oh, well, that's different. Well, if it is truly different and marketplaces are separated by separate bubbles of products and surfaces, then just ask yourself this. Are you charging the same as Penn and Teller for each one of your shows? Are you charging the same as David Blaine or Copperfield? And if you're not, and you're charging a lot less than them, which I'm going to take a wild guess and assume you are charging a lot less than them, are you forcing them to charge less? Are you taking jobs away from Penn and Teller because you're charging 1/10 of what they're doing? Of course not. They're more famous. They have a higher demand than us. Everyone knows their proof of value. So of course they're going to hire them. And of course they can charge more. And of course they have to charge more even as well because they have more costs. And this is where we start to see this argument being as simplified as I suggested earlier. The marketplace is not as simple as whatever the lowest price is the one people buy. And those low prices force other people to get cheaper. It's not as simple as that. In fact, people tend to buy what they consider as the best value for their money. The same reason you normally avoid buying those 30p chocolates or those really cheap chocolates in the most plain white wrapper in existence. Well, because we judge a book by its cover and go, that can't be that good. It can't be the exact same ingredients as the other chocolate that the supermarket sells. It has to be different. In fact, research and studies show that most people actually avoid those middle price things. In fact, if people are given a list of 3 things to buy, cheap, medium, and high, most people go for the medium one. It's got a brilliant name. It's called the Goldilocks effect. And I'll allow you to look that up, or I can mention it in another video. The fact is, if someone's given 3 options to pick from, let's say 3 magicians, £50, £100, and £200, or £150, most people are not going for the cheaper one. Most people are going to go for that medium one because this is too cheap, this is too expensive, and this one is just right. The only way this argument actually begins to start working is if every magician looked the same, acted the same, and had the same promo marketing materials and websites. Only at that point would people start going to McDonald's instead of Michelin star restaurants for their Valentine's Day. In short, it's just simply not true. A low price magician doesn't lower the economy for everyone else. The most important thing is your price to match the value that you're handing out. If a magician doesn't have a website, then it's probably less likely they're going to get booked at a higher price than you if you have a website. And you can't expect each of those magicians to charge the same, because at that point you do have the same price for two products where one clearly looks better. It's not price that wins, it's value that wins. And price is meant to change around the value that you're offering and the package that you have. So now that we can see price is not meant to be set in stone, let's move on to the second argument, that you should raise your prices, because by having lower prices, people are going to start to assume that you're bad. Alright, now out of the two, this one definitely holds a lot more ground. This one's based on a marketing thing called perceived value. And perceived value is basically the idea that if you saw something too cheap or suspiciously cheap, you're probably thinking, it has to be bad, right? Can't be that good. Not only that, but if you saw something similar next to that cheap item that was a bit more expensive, your perceived notion is to think, well, that has to be better, right? When you look at very expensive cars, they have to be good because they're expensive. When you see a very expensive house, it has to be a good house because it is expensive. Expensive things and things that cost a lot are normally good, right? However, while this is based on truth and it is based on an actual marketing term and technique, my biggest issue with this is it just simply doesn't go far enough into explaining what perceived value is. And because it doesn't go far enough into explaining that, it actually causes more harm than good. So to give a more broader definition on perceived value is how much a customer believes a product or a service is worth. Not how much the actual value of it is, but how much they perceive it to be worth. And that perceived value actually changes over time. So for example, with us, let's say they looked at my website, they looked at my video reels and they went, this is really good. I think in my head, this magician is worth about £250. But then I get to the gig and I'm drunk and I'm hitting people non-stop, just getting into fights, squaring up with people. Then my perceived value is going to drop a lot lower and I'm going to look like I'm ripping off people instead. So it's very important that a perceived value stays consistent or even better, increases over time. In fact, if you've had that compliment where a customer said, oh, you were so good, I think you should be charging more, then congratulations. That means your perceived value at the end exceeded how much they actually gave you and probably increased during the show. So with that in mind, should you be increasing your prices? No, at least not straight away. While it's important to know that a price does add to the idea of perceived value, it's also important to know that it's not the only factor that's at play.
Meet Andrew and Andrew. Both of these magicians charge £150 an hour. But which one would you hire? The one stuck in time or Mr. Chest Hair?
Apart from clothes, posture, and general good looks, your perceived value is made up of a huge number of things, including and not limited to your website, your photos, your show reels, and even your sales pitch. The moment someone starts looking at you as someone to potentially hire, they start working out a price point in their head. The moment they click on your website, they go £20. They look at a photo, they say 40. They look at a video, they say 100. They read your sales pitch and they say £200. Your price is not the only thing they're looking at. And in fact, most of us don't even have our price on our website because we send individual quotes. And here is the only thing that can really damage you at this point. Let's say someone's looked at your website and came up with a perceived value in their head. If your quote is higher than the value that they came up with in their head, well, it doesn't matter how good of a magician you are. It doesn't matter how high your perceived value will get when you finally start showing them tricks and entertaining their guests. It doesn't matter how good personally you are at performing right there at their wedding. It doesn't matter, because your perceived value at that point wasn't good enough and your price point was too high for them. It doesn't matter how good you are as a magician, because no one's going to hire you. If it was just as simple as raising your price means that you're a good magician, then I'll start charging £2,000 an hour, maybe £10,000 an hour, because that would get me booked a lot more, because people would think I'm the most sexy magician that ever existed. Now, if you are a magician that's looking to do some paid work, let me give you some advice. At the beginning, and for your first few gigs, charge whatever you can get. If that's £20 an hour, you do 1 hour at a bar, just do it. Take the money. You're not worse off, you're getting £20, right? And then use that money to start investing in yourself. At the moment, when you first start, you don't have a perceived value. People will just have to trust you, or you need to approach them and show them magic for real life. But after that, you're going to start having reviews. Use that money to start making a website. Use that money to start getting photo shoots or start supporting your social medias. Use that money to invest in yourself. And then you're going to start snowballing. You're going to start being able to charge more. And more importantly, once you start charging more, your perceived value is going to match the price that you're promoting. Also, you learn in practice things that you wouldn't have necessarily dealt with in magic, like how to negotiate or haggle a price, how to email professionally, how to write an invoice. Have you ever had to do that before? I didn't. I had to get an app for it. You can do that, by the way. But you start learning all these super important things that when you start doing these gigs at a higher price, you're going to come across so more professionally, and you're going to be so much more better prepared for it. You're going to know how to deal with that drunk person over there, and you're going to know how to deal with that haggler over there. And that's the end of the video, guys. I hope you absolutely enjoyed it. I hope you found something I said interesting, and I at least hope you found some bits of it funny. I promise you the next video is going to be a lot more lighthearted. It's going to be a lot more fun, because that's ultimately what I want this channel to be. But this was just something I felt like I had to get off my chest, and I had to talk about it, because it's something that's kind of pretty much irritated me in the magic community for a little while. So I just kind of almost used this first video as a way to vent, but I hope you still found it interesting, and I hope there was bits of knowledge in there that you can appreciate and just go, oh yeah, I've never really thought that much about my perceived value. At least that's what I hope you take away from it. If you do want to speak more to me, or you want to discuss other ideas, or you just want to have a general chit chat, in fact, not even just with me, if you just want to speak to other magicians, there's this amazing Discord group called the People's Palace, or Prestigious People's Palace. I'm going to call it PPP for short. It's in the link below. I'll leave a link in the video. You can have amazing conversations with other magicians like this.
So basically, magic does get you laid. Depends. Do you want to be laid by a dog? No, that is the big bad.
Right? So why wouldn't you join? My name's been Andrew Phoenix. I'm your magician, and I'll see you in the next video. Peace. You recording?
Yes.
So stupid. Oh.